Know, O Prince, that before the oceans drank Lemuria, and between the rise of the sons of Yakub, there was an age undreamed of.
Emu's actually on Mars, 4x4 automobile, a trebuchet. The Giza Mass Autism Array was a weapon that we believe to be constructed by Alberto Barbosa, Finnish Jedi Knight, duking it out on dinosaur back. It will be known as the Battle of Al-Bout to come. The reduction in the penis length of...
I renovated my desk setup recently, and I got a new standing desk courtesy of FlexiSpot, today's sponsor, which is able to allow me to edit standing down and sitting up whenever I feel like I need to have a little bit of a stretch.
Welcome to today's class on the Finno Korean Hyperwar. If you're very confused on what you're seeing right now, please go to my video of History of Ancient Earth prior to the Finno Korean Hyperwar. Historians agree that the first point of contact comes to us from Turan itself, the demilitarized zone. Here we have Perka Spudosparde, who leads an assault on the Turanian capital of Sarkula right over here. Perka Spudosparde will lead his army and kill the Nephilim that were basically acting as peacekeepers of Turan, thus adding Turan to Finnish conquests here. That is basically the first inciting incident, which basically triggers the Hwan Empire to do two things right now. One, they will expand rapidly and will also launch a counter-offensive over here, which will lead to the Battle of Siberia.
Now, you've been sitting for a while during this video, but you could be standing while watching it, and you could be doing so with today's sponsor, FlexiSpot, the standing table. I need a standing desk so I can stare for long periods of time while standing, using it daily for war planning. The features of the desk that allow for a table to go higher than my shoulders. I often take naps on the standing desk, holding a weight of 355 pounds. It is very comfortable and reasonably priced as well, as it's the perfect summer mattress. The table itself is very stable, which makes it easy for typing or remove the worry for objects falling when you're ascending and descending. Despite its easy setup, the desk itself is not prone to wobbling whatsoever, and because of the amount of weight it can sustain, you could push all sorts of objects on top of the desk if you want to, including those heavier than yours truly. I feel that this desk is a good addition to my life, as now I don't need to hunch over and sit down to watch something or to do an activity anymore. I could just stand up and do said activity, whether it be doing some arts and crafts, playing my war games, typing on my computer, or just sleeping down. This desk is absolutely perfect. Click the link in the description below for your own standing table today.
The Battle of Siberia, as depicted right over here, was between a majority of the Hwan newly established cyber cavalry against the Finnish forces here, which are usually armed by Ursine or Mammoth cavalry. While that was going on, the Hwan Empire will launch a secret offensive right over here at the Finnish-held city of Giza. Now, Dangun the Eldest, with his squadron of proto-ninjas, will take control over the Giza vaporation arrays that were basically underneath the Finnish space fleet that was ready to launch an orbital bombardment campaign across the Hwan Empire. This is when, of course, Dangun the Eldest was met with the Ursine cavalry that were defending the Giza arrays there. And so proto-ninjas were fighting against Ursine cavalry. However, before the proto-ninjas were forced to retreat, Dangun the Eldest activated the vaporation array, which you can see right over here. It basically fires off a beam of energized memory that basically shoots up into the atmosphere and vaporizes the Finnish Navy. And so because of this battle right over here, the Finnish space forces are left inoperable. And so because of that, the entirety of the Finnish Empire is now being laid waste by bombardment over here. Here we have bombardment sites with hyperspace missiles, rods from God. We have orbital bombardments. We have Ijo atomic space artillery, just a bunch of shit. And you can see the level of damage between these centers over here, albeit not as much as the Nordic countries here, but that's because the Finnish Empire used many of their strongest capitals, had the strongest in or anti-orbital defenses. Here we have a bubble shield over here that was used in the city of Listanbuli. Right? The city of Listanbuli will have their orbital shield that will last until they were laid siege to. This battle between the proto-ninjas and the Ursine cavalry will be known as the Battle of Al-Bout to come. Now, the Battle of Albat to come becomes famous for the assault of the proto-ninjas against the Ursine cavalry, but also the Finnish navy being completely inoperable at this stage of the war, essentially. And really, the conflict just heats up more and more as we have a battle between Hwan and Finnish forces over here, a Finnish firebender going up against a Hwan Korean soldier. That would be because the Hwan Empire launches a conquest of India, basically conquering much of the Indian subcontinent over here, and eventually laying waste to Lemurian forces that were basically seen right over here in southern India. This battle is what we know as the Battle of Tibet, and we believe that this battle was mainly from Hwan and Finnish forces meeting each other over here in this western India area, so to speak. Now, these sequence of events basically are what we see right over here in Eurasia prior to the Finno Korean Hyperwar. And of course, after the Hwan bombardment of Finnish cities here, the Finnish forces will start to use their ski warriors for guerrilla warfare across the Hwan Empire, as depicted over here. However, the Battle of Siberia is a little bit differently if we look at it from the 4chan perspective. On the 4chan perspective, we see that apparently the Battle of Siberia comes from Finnish space forces creeping into Hwan Central Asian lands without the Hwan realizing it, because they are stealth battle cruisers. The Hwan Empire then appoints Jackie Chan to lead an army of Iranians, Tibetans, Mongolians, and all sorts of Hwan Empire minority groups to fight against these Finnish intruders here. And they will fight at the First Battle of Siberia, which we conclude is right over here, actually, around the Central Asian area, and less over here up north, so to speak. It was here, at this First Battle of Siberia, that we have a Finnish general by the name of Genghis Khan, which you can see right over here, use something what we know as unleashing autism. And so because of that, Jackie Chan's army basically is annihilated at the Battle of Siberia. So there are two different Battle of Siberias going on, essentially. Now, from this version of the Battle of Siberia, the Finnish forces will launch a two-pronged assault over here in Punjab to take back the lands that the Hwan Empire had recently conquered over here, leading, of course, to this Battle of Punjab fight that goes on. Now, the Battle of Punjab is a failure for the Finnish forces, but it lays the seeds for the Finnish forces to be able to take back the territory that the Hwan Empire took in Siberia. And because of that, the Hwan Empire basically is able to march unmolested to Listambuli and lay siege to Listambuli in the famous Siege of Listambuli. Alright, so one of my lights went out, but the show must go on. So right now we have the Siege of Listambuli. The Hwan Empire are pushing forward across Mesopotamia, taking out the Finnish occupations here. And here we have, of course, Bruce Lee fighting against other Jedi. You see, at Listambuli, the Hwan Empire will lay siege to the city. Half the Finnic Jedi who serve the Proto-Finnic Holy Roman Khaganate will revolt and switch sides to the Hwan Empire. That is because these Jedi are going to try and overthrow Emperor Vainamonen for his crimes against humanity. Now, because of this, Emperor Shiv and the ancient Finnish Empire will try and annihilate the entirety of the city of Listambuli and destroy all mentions of the Jedi revolting against Emperor Vainamonen. This fails. Half the Jedi revolt to Hwan Empire successfully, including, of course, Bruce Lee. We have here Obi-Wan Ken Kenobi, who now becomes a notable commander at this time period. And this is basically the initial period of fighting for the Finno Korean Hyperwar. We have the Battle of Siberia, Battle of Tibet, we have the Battle of Punjab, we have the Siege of Listambuli, we have the Battle of Albat to come, we have the second Battle of Siberia from a 4chan source, and then of course we have the orbital bombardment campaign of these empires in question. This is only the first stage, mind you. The Hwan Empire will basically from Listambuli be able to advance all the way to what we know as the Bosnian Pyramids. The Bosnian Pyramids are what we believe to be an early form of the autism pyramids that were created during the initial phase of cooperation between the Hwan Empire and the Finnish Empire. And so because of that, because of the effects of the Bosnian Pyramids, the Hwan forces are unable to penetrate deep into Europe. And so that ends the first phase of the Finno Korean Hyperwar. From this point onwards, Basically, most cities in Eurasia are essentially rubble. They are destroyed by rods of God, by hydroatomic artillery, from hyperspace missiles, from all sorts of weird and wacky weapons from both sides, and as well as from anything that comes from the minor sides here as well. By 8000 BCE, the Proto Indo Europeans that had once basically been under the thumb of these major empires start to break free and start to challenge them. Not an open revolt, mind you, but you start to see them in more and more influences of government. For example, here we have Fred McFeely Rogers over here, who, with his ancient Proto Indo European rifle, is able to kill many different Hwan Empire soldiers. And here we have Gaius Julius Caesar, an immortal Proto-Indo-European man who was said to be the founder of the Roman Empire. And we're continuing to see more devastation impact both of these peoples. Rice paddies for the Hwan Empire are being ravaged by Finnish ski warriors, and vitamin D caches in Karelia are being orbitally bombarded by the Hwan Empire. So now we get on to something that's kind of forgotten about in the Finno Korean Hyperwar. That would be, of course, the Stellar Front. The Stellar Front encompasses the human colonies of our planet's top empires. That would be, of course, the Finnic Empire over here and the Hwan Empire. You will also see a colony of emus actually on Mars, but over the course of the Finno Korean Hyperwar, that colony will be blasted by orbital lasers. So aside from the ancient Finnish Empire and the Hwan Empire, there are no other human colonies. Now, starting from the inception of these empires gaining space travel, they will expand rapidly across multiple different star systems. Here we have a map depicting many different star systems. Some of them owned by Hwan Empire, some of them owned by Finnish Empire, some are split between both of them. We see that that's the case with Sol. Sol is completely dominated by humanity with the exception of the planet of Maldek. Maldek is ruled over by a subsect of aliens that are reptilian that possibly come from Alpha Centauri and are related to the Centaurians. Now, they will unleash a guerrilla war campaign on the planet of Maldek, preventing any type of Finnish or Korean forces to lay claim to it. Outside of that, though, the rest of the planets are more or less dealt with by both of these human empires. We have the aliens of Y0855 that are basically ignored. We have the aliens of the energy beings Phaeton that are ruled over in the Cirrus, but essentially they will become enslaved by the Hwan Empire and turned into living computers essentially for their spaceships. So you see these Hwan Empire vessels over here that are basically under the control of Phaeton energy beings, you know, enslaved basically. We even see Alpha Centauri split apart between Hwan and Finnish forces as the Centaurians are relegated to one planet in their tri-planet system and unfortunately are part of a slave race as well. Now, after the Battle of Albak to come, basically the Finnish forces and the Finnish space colonies are in a very, very bad situation as they ultimately basically are at the mercy of the Hwan Empire's navy. This is where Spruto Sparde McMahon basically develops an ingenious plan. He wishes to use hyperspace bombs to destroy the subspace lanes here, particularly in Cyrus. He effectively wants to cut off Cyrus from the rest of the Hwan Empire's navy, which basically Cyrus was used as a staging point for the Hwan Empire Navy's like plans and situations and as like a control node, so to speak, right? In fact, it was even linked to Hungary during the Unified Empire times, actually, via teleporters. But Cyrus still is used as a Hwan Empire staging ground. And at this moment, it basically is unchallenged. That is until McMahon's hyperspace bomb plan. So at the cost of a Finnish colony, we don't know which one of them, maybe at Wolf 359 because it's not owned by anybody, basically, this colony is annihilated, and Cyrus, because of that, is essentially cut off by the rest of the hyperspace lanes due to the hyperspace bomb usage. Now, because of that, the energy beings of Phaeton basically revolt. So not only do the Finnish Empire's base navy basically cuts off the Hwan Empire's navy from the rest of their colonial subjects and Seoul, but the Phaeton energy beings are now revolting in Cyrus. And they're revolting across the systems. And not only that, the Hwan Empire takes wind of the Finnish Empire's quantum hyperbomb strategy. So not only will the Finnish empires use the quantum hyperbombs, but the Hwan Empire will as well. And this is a look of the hyperspace lanes before the quantum hyperbombs are used by both opponents, or both belligerents. So eventually, all of these hyperspace lanes become completely and utterly annihilated following these usage of the quantum hyperbombs, essentially. Now, this creates multiple different problems. First and foremost, the aliens basically see this, and not only do the Phaetons attack all humans in sight, but the Centauri's also do the same thing. So you will see Centaurians attacking the Hwan forces over here and the Finnish forces over here. And you see Phaetons also attacking across the systems as well. So you see that the aliens are hunting down every single basically human colony that they can have their hands on to annihilate humanity and destroy all traces of their space empires. Now, what is humanity doing in the meantime? Well, they are fighting over layering points. You see, layering points are very useful for being able to control Earth's orbital sphere, because without them, it's very hard for you to take off, okay, and send out ships to and fro the solar system here, right? So like in order to really get anywhere around the planet, around Earth, you need these layering points to be able to triangulate your ships with the various positions around space-time. So one after another, each of these layering points are being fought over. And at the end, at layering point 1 over here, we see a climactic battle between gene golems and space mammoths. I don't have an image of a space mammoth here, but I will display one on screen for you guys right here so that you guys are not too confused. Gene golems, from what we know, are a Hwan experiment in psychic ability and technology. They are combined from Finnic Jedi and psychically attuned people and created in these massive laboratories. They are just blobs of meat and clay and flesh and are psychically powerful. So they're able to use their psychic powers however they see fit, essentially. And they are basically extremely destructive forces. We know because of the 4chan threads that only 500 of them were ever operational at a time. But these gene golems were instrumental in fighting with the Finnish forces over the layering points, and especially against the Finnish space mammoths. After the Battle of Layering Point 1, of course, however, you will have an unfortunate situation. All of the debris, all of the quantum hyperspace bombs, and the battles of Layering Point, these multiple different space battles between Hwan and Finnish navies, they basically create a subspace anomaly that exists around Seoul, preventing any ships from going to and from Seoul itself. So Seoul is cut off from all hyperspace routes, preventing any type of communication with its outer colonial subjects as well as Seoul itself. So now not only are aliens attacking all of our colonies and slaughtering them, but Seoul is cut off, and because of that, colonies that are dependent on materials from Seoul are starving to death, and Seoul, which was dependent on raw materials from these colonies, is facing resource shortages, which starts to decline their technology. So not only is their technology declining from the rampant destruction of the orbital bombardments of both empires, but it's also declining because they're unable to get the rare materials and metals that are from these colonies. Thus, technology starts to decline. We start to go from laser beams and, UFOs and all this type of shit and highly advanced armor to basically medieval forces with arrows, bows, swords, and shields. Maybe the occasional ray gun here and there, as technology starts to slowly decline from here to here, basically. So let's take a break from the conflict to talk about the armies in question. Emperor Vainamoinen leads the ancient Finnish Empire. Kim Il-sung First Hwan leads the ancient Hwan Empire. They have commanders that are underneath them here and there, especially girls' generation from the Hwan Empire, and of Lemuria, actually, for the ancient Finnish Empire. Here, from the start, the grunt level, the first type of soldier, we have, of course, the foot soldier for the Hwan Empire and the ancient Finnish Empire. Now, from looking at these two foot soldiers, you see kind of like where both of these empires are emphasizing their focus on. So for the Hwan Empire, it's on cybernetics and mechanical engineering and stuff. It's how to remove as much of the human from the warfare as possible. whereas the ancient Finnish Empire employs much of their forces without any cybernetic or mechanical augmentation. That is because they are mostly emphasizing their natural Fingolian talents of guerrilla warfare, as you can see by their ski shoes, but also their psychic abilities as well. The more cybernetics you have, the less psychically attuned you are. So because of that, these Hwan soldiers are more or less very powerful, but psychically unaware in comparison to the Finnish soldiers over here. Notice the ranged weapon in conjunction with the melee sword over here. So you can see that Finnish soldiers, especially Fingolians, will get into melee conflict. Now, more or less, these soldiers are very much disposable. If you're a Hwan Empire, like higher up dude as a foot soldier, you can upload your consciousness into a new body with microchips. And for the ancient Finnish Empire, that's the same thing, but it depends on your psychic attunement and how big your pineal gland is. So that's basically the first foot soldiers over here. Then, of course, we have the cavalry. We have the cyber cavalry of the Hwan Empire. It's basically just a regular horse, but as you can see, this is the horse in question without any armor. So you see it's very mechanical. And here we have the horses as depicted on rock art, as you can see over here. Of course, much of our knowledge of the Finno Korean Hyperwar is just based on megalithic structures, of course. Here, we have the Ursine cavalry of the ancient Finnish Empire. They are the best of the best. You ride bears into battle. I see no problem with this. Here we also have the Swiss mercenaries, one of many Proto Indo European groups that the Finnish forces will press gang into serving them. We even have, of course, the Finnic Jedi Knights, or in this case, the meme, Mud Finnic Jedi Knights, which is, and I'll quote it, this expression indicates a Finn's confusion and lack of understanding when confronted with something he cannot understand or respond to. Finns mumble, Mud Jedi Knights, or Mud Jedi Knights, motherfucker. This is usually followed by the mocking of Hwanite, or reminding you of the several 100,000. So, this post is basically about how Finnish people will more or less rely on Jedi Knights being the ones that were able to win the Finno Korean Hyperwar. And less on anything else, okay? These guys are powerful. And yeah, the Finnic Jedi Knights are very powerful. They don't use, like I said, the term Jedi, okay, is not something that I would say like, oh, these are the Jedi from Star Wars. No, the term Jedi is a term that we're using in response to having no other word for these people, okay? We do not have a word for these Finnish peoples that were robed and used psychic lasers. The lightsabers are not, these are not lightsabers. They are known as Sumoy sabers, okay? S-U-O-M-I saber. These Sumoy sabers are basically irresponsible, okay, for the lightsabers that we come to know from the Jedi Knights. But they are more or less psychic based. They are not based on energy or crystals, based on psychic intellect and power. And they can also unleash psychic abilities, which people have interpreted to be the Force. So that's why you call them Jedi Knights. You see here, Emperor Vainamonen used Jedi Knights as bodyguards, and this was later used by the Byzantines for the Vanagarian Guard. So that's where they get their Vanagarian Guards from. Now, the Jedi Knights are often pitted against the Hwan Empire's proto-ninjas. The proto-ninjas were much more costly. They were very, very, very hard to actually get into the proto-ninjas. You had to train for 2 years, then spend $2 million on becoming a proto-ninja with all this state-of-the-art augmentation. But afterwards, you were basically thrice as strong as a normal human being. You were able to cut through steel like butter. Your armor and weaponry were psychically resistant. So you basically were a contemporary, a good rival against the Jedi Knights. And also, you were invisible. Look here. This is a room filled with proto-ninjas. Look, they're all over. They're filling up the whole room, but you can't see them because of their cloaking technology. Here we have a proto-ninja on cavalry back. This is like a snake horse. And then here we have a proto-ninja unsheathed with its drones ready to fight a Finnic Jedi Knight. So proto-ninjas are able to cut through steel. They are psychically resistant. And they are invisible. So the difference between a Hwan Proto-Ninja and a Finnic Jedi Knight is very hard. It's not like one is better than the other. One is able to channel its psychic energy better and use a type of lightsaber, okay, that was also basically channeled through psychic energy, and they can also tap into the Force and use psychic powers. The other one is more cybernetically and mechanically powerful, albeit of course they are more expensive and they take longer to train for. So there's always going to be less pro ninjas in comparison to Finnic Jedi Knights, but you have to have an aptitude to even be a Finnic Jedi Knight in the first place. And in fact, the Finnic forces will still have an advantage in some forms of warfare. Here, of course, we have a Finnic ski warrior over here. All Finnic foot soldiers are able to ski. So you see, this is a basic foot soldier able to ski away from conflict. Over here, you have a regular Finnic soldier without any ranged weaponry. We theorize that this was later on into the Finno Korean Hyperwar when technology started to decline. So the Finnish forces became more and more primitive and barbaric, as with the Hwan Empire forces, mind you. Here, we have two images. We have a perfect 256-man Macedonian phalanx, which was inspired by the Finnish Aki legions. And these were legions of Fingolians that were using massive spears, essentially, hundreds of thousands of years before, okay, all of this madness that happened. This was during the Atlantean Finnish Wars. And then, of course, Ultra Kabumitzers are the favored artillery piece for the Finnish forces. On top of all of these unique forces, we have, of course, something that that both of these armies have in common: their usage of mammoths. So you see over here, well, that's a mech. Mammoths are basically used by both sides, as the mammoth migration trail passes through the ancient Finnish Empire and the Hwan Empire. So you see this mammoth that's being ridden all by itself, okay, while a battlefield is going on, where a cannon is firing at flying pyramids and shit. We have a Finnish soldier just chilling with its mammoth over here. We have a Hwan soldier being ambushed by Finnish soldiers while it's riding its own mammoth. So you see the usage of mammoths on both sides, and unfortunately these will become a common casualty on the battlefield, especially of course mechs. Mechs as well are used by both sides as well, in conjunction with mammoths. So you see the combination of the forces of the natural and the mechanical being used to great effect in this conflict. Now, after the Battle of Laring Point 1, we then return ourselves back to Eurasia. We will have a small conflict that occurs over here around what we know as the Bosnian Pyramids. So there will be a small collection of pyramids right over here around Bosnia, and there'll be a battle around them, essentially. Maybe it's the Hwan Empire's attempt to try and take control of the Bosnian pyramids. We don't really fully know, essentially. Now, we know that unlike the Giza pyramids, the Bosnian pyramids were never activated. So this battle must have been a complete failure for the Hwan Empire in totality. Aside from the battle at the Bosnian pyramids, we also have the Battle of the Urals over here. The Battle of the Urals will actually be when a small force of Finnic Jedi Knights will hold off a much larger Korean force, actually. Now, the Hwan Empire will attack these Finnic Jedi Knights, holding off in the Urals not one time, not two times, but three times. So there'll be three battles of the Urals, essentially, where these Finnic Jedi Knights are barely holding it together until the third battle of the Urals, where they get reinforcements, they chase down the Hwan forces, and slaughter them in the forest. The interesting part is that these Jedi Knights that succeeded in the defense of the Urals would basically be able to defend the Alps, actually. The Alps are not a natural mountain formation. They're a mountain fortress that were created by the Finnic Jedi Knights as a new home. And so because of that, when the Hwan Empire attempted to invade through the Mediterranean and attack through the Alps, it triggered the Battle of the Alps over here. And the Battle of the Alps was between the Finnic Jedi Knights and the Hwan invasion forces through the Mediterranean, which ended up being a complete failure. The Finnic Jedi Knights will also create a new Jedi temple in Lund 2 over here. So although their order has been severely cut in half, they're still able to create new academies in the Alps and in Lund 2. Now, after this Battle of the Alps, the Finns, just like in the Battle of Punjab, will attempt to once again invade into India, leading, of course, into the Battle of India Himraj, or the Battle of India Imraja. In the Battle of India Imraja, we have basically these Finnic Utenhavens racing down to Central Asia, confronting the Korean thunder cavalry of warlord Sing Fu. And it becomes one of the bloodiest battles in all of India, to the point where many theorize that once this battle had ended, basically, the Finnish forces were completely victorious, but the Hwan Empire would flood the entirety of the Indian subcontinent. Now, with most of the Finns underwater comes, of course, the bombing of Lemuria. Here we have some hieroglyphics that depict some Hwan aerial craft that were instrumental in the bombing of Lemuria. Here we also see the Lemurian citadel over here, which is essentially home to the capital of the warlocks that preside over Lemuria itself. Now, we know of the Hwan bombing of Lemuria because we know of a site in India known as Mohenjo-daro. Mohenjo-daro, which I believe is like right over here, hosts a variety of radiation deemed weaponry. Actually, there's a lot of clay pots and tablets and all this shit that depict a variety of nuclear weapons that were held at the site. We know now that this site was the home of the Hwan forces in their aerial bombardment of Lemuria itself. The bombing campaign of the Hwan forces would be so devastating that they would even bomb Nephilim under Chipchong Nipnong, and this would basically start the disappearance of the Nephilim from our planet whatsoever. Here we see that Nephilim have basically acted as guardians, as peacekeepers throughout the planet, but from the tragedy that happens at Turan and basically them being bombed by the Hwan forces here, they're basically being attacked by both the Hwan and Finnish Empire. And so because of that, many Nephilim decide to leave the planet. That's where we get the event known as the Disappearance of the Nephilim at 8000 BCE. Now, while the Hwan Empire are busy bombing the shit out of Lemuria and the Nephilim, they're also launching an attack on Doggerland itself. So we have 4 battles here: the Battle of Scarborough Hill, Battle of Brittany, Battle of Ulm, Battle of Gobo's Island. Scarborough Hill basically is the Hwan's attempts to invade into northern Doggerland, but they're essentially thwarted by the efforts of the Welsh forces here. Here we depict the battle here, as you can see, with a mixed-use army of both medieval forces, Proto Indo European like forces, some orangutans, a 4x4 automobile, a trebuchet, and a catapult. So you see the differences in weaponry being used here as well. Here we have the Battle of Ulm, where you see Proto-Indo-Europeans engaged in conflict, as well as one of them stopping for a juice break. This is very important, as many Proto-Indo-Europeans will have Finnish sweets and like drinks that will give them nourishment in the battle. Now, Scarborough Hill is a failure for the Hwan forces. They're routed by the Welsh forces there. And the Battle of Brittany showed the Anglo-Saxons even being able to thwart the efforts of the Hwan Empire. However, the Battle of Ulm is seen as a failure for the Finnish forces. It seems that half of the Welsh forces did not agree with Finnish authority, and so because of that switched sides to the Hwan Empire. Outnumbered 5-1, they were basically instrumental in allowing a detachment of the allied Hwan forces to escape, holding off a much larger Finnish fleet, actually. And these sheep cavalrymen and druidic mages were instrumental in holding off the Finnish Empire from being able to take back Germany from the Hwan Empire at this time, as they were invading much of Doggerland. At the Battle of the Aurelian River, we have an unusual thing that happens. A Proto-Indo-European Cossack people have a oceanic air fortress above this river over here to prevent crossing for the Hwan and Finnish empires. At a rare move of cooperation, Admiral Ji Li Xing Pao and Archduke Kalaminin III basically both lay siege and destroy the sky fortress, which basically shows, wow, we could have all been friends all along, couldn't we? We then also have the Battle of the Ice Gobi Desert here. At the Battle of the Ice Gobi Desert, we see Hwan and Finnish mammoths battling it out over the skies of this desert here, as we know that Finnish space mammoths were used in ground and air assaults at this time. The next important battle happened at the Battle of Hurricane Crossing. Over here we have the map of the battle in which you see Finnish forces were outnumbered by the Hwan forces. You're seeing cavalry, infantry, armor, artillery, mammoths, mecha, and proto-ninjas. And the Hwan Empire had a lot of proto-ninjas at their disposal. But what the Finnish general did, whose name was, so what the fuck is this guy's name? Finnish General Tabuli Servergi. This guy basically takes his mammoths over here and crosses the mountains across this river and ends up routing the Hwan Empire's forces here. So because of that, they're able to liberate most of Hwan Mesopotamia away from this empire and into the hands of the Finnish Empire. So the Finns win a decisive victory over here that sees them taking back control over Mesopotamia. And all because this Finnish general moved across these mountains over here in a brilliant maneuver that wouldn't be copied until Hannibal Barca. Rounding out these battles, of course, is the third battle of Tokyo over here. The third battle of Tokyo basically starts with the Emu forces raiding into the Hwan Empire. Now the Emus have been raiding Africans, Indians, Finnish forces, and Hwan Empire ever since they've been created in Australia after the Battle of Uluru. However, the Emus will now launch an attack on Tokyo that is so devastating they're basically able to actually annex parts of Japan. And because of that, the Hwan Empire have to use their hyper laser to annihilate the Emu forces. Not before, of course, the Emus were able to take control and capture Hwan princesses and goddesses. So the Emus won a decisive victory here in this battle. And while the Hwan forces have lost and gained battles in this conflict in Doggerland, the Hwan Empire are able to take capture of the Stonehenge communications array, thus allowing the Hwan Empire not only the ability to once again be able to communicate with their space forces and their space empire, but also be able to gather around scattered army units that are fighting across Eurasia much more effectively. This will allow the Hwan Empire to basically end their bombardment campaign of Lemuria and start their offensive deep into Lemuria in what we know as the Battle of Lemuria. Now the Battle of Lemuria is a very, very devastating battle, all things considered. First we have Hwan Empire and Finnish Empire and Commune of Lemuria forces that are battling it out with dinosaurs. You see over here two dinosaurs, one allied to the Finnish, one allied to the Hwan Empire fighting it out. We see Hwan Proto Ninja fighting against Finnish Jedi Knight, duking it out on dinosaur back. We see here also various dinosaurs from both sides using laser beams to annihilate each other over here on the Lemurian frontier. So you see that even the dinosaurs are fighting it out, as even there would be a giant dinosaur known as Tyrannosaurus Rex over here that would fight for the Finnish Empire. So you see that dinosaurs are even being included. Hell, even dragons were included in this conflict as well, as dragons both served the Hwan and Finnish Empire. Here, of course, we see Girls' Generation fighting against a Lemurian warlock. So you see the power of K-pop against Lemurian magic as well. And Lemurian magic is nothing to scoff at. Here we have a Lemurian which basically runs around and tries to eat you alive. Here we have a Lemurian necromancer recreating his whole army, including his beloved family pet over here. So you see that the Lemurians are starting to use their most magically powerful and devastating spells at their disposal to destroy the Hwan Empire. What's this image over there? Oh. This right over here, this is, don't ever look it in the eye. It's scary. So you see the most evil of Lemurian magic start to take hold. And it's at the Battle of Lemuria where these dinosaurs, where this Lemurian magic, where this K-pop are all fighting it out, that Lemuria suddenly sinks into the ocean and its people disappear. We call this the disappearance of Lemuria. Like the departure of the Nephilim. We know the Nephilim existed and they left our planet. But the disappearance of Lemuria, we have no signs of where the Lemurians left and if they even left. They just disappeared. And the entire continent sunk into the ocean. So now the Lemurians don't exist at all, whatsoever. And so now we can consider this and the capital Lemuria basically gone and erased from history at this point. The Lemurians will not exist henceforth. And so now we're basically in the next stage of the war, essentially, where we have no more Lemuria. So after the sinking of Lemuria, we also have to now contend with the emus. The emus took a lot of stuff from the Hwan Empire, one of them being, of course, autism generators. You see, the Hwan Empire was experimenting with autism generators for a while as they tried to match the Finns in their autism generation. Now, the emus will start a civil war between the emu confederacies because of the power of this autism generation, and also because of the meddling between the Finnish and Hwan forces over the different polities within the emu confederacy. You see, the emu confederacy was different nations of emus made up into one big blob. And so two groups of emus basically fought in what we know as the Battle of Shatpost, which came from a dynastic squabble over who will rule the emu people. One side will reign victorious, but will unleash the effects of the Giza mass autism array, albeit on a smaller scale. And so because of that, the emus will, from their reign of tyranny, de-evolve and once again become flightless birds. So now the emus as a faction are out of the equation. Now you will see some emu states still continue to exist past this period, especially in the Emu Federation's Second Indian Campaign, where you see the Emu Federation attempt to raid into India during its fight with the Hwan, Lemurian, and Finnish forces here. There are some theories that point to the emus also being responsible for the disappearance of the Lemurians. So it's possible that during the Second Indian Campaign, the Lemurians were basically disappearing. So it's possible that because of the influence of Hwan, Finnish, Emu, and Lemurian magics, that's what caused the downfall of Lemuria. Now, in an attempt to counteract the Finnish gains in Mesopotamia, the Hwan Empire will launch an assault all the way to Helsinki itself at the Siege of Helsinki. From here, we will see Hwan hive ships battling over Ukraine and fighting against the Helsinki air defense forces. Here we have the capital city of Helsinki, which was once a fishing village, very small, very backwater, very dirty, and now a futuristic hub of science and wonder, the gem of the Proto-Finnic Holy Roman Khaganate. Now, overhead, flying over the skies, are Hwan and Finnish air forces here, basically fighting over control of Helsinki. Now, while this is going on, we then also have a counter invasion by the Finns over here. They will invade in what we know as the Duel of Gyeong Pain. At the Duel of Gyeong Pain, we have Emperor Vainamoinen over here battling against, of course, Emperor Kim Il-sung First Hwan. They will engage in a duel between each other, and it will end up being that the Emperor Vainamoinen will reign supreme, and it's only through the sacrifice of 1 trillion eunuchs does Emperor Kim Il-sung First Hwan flee back to Pyongyang. From here, there's a lot of events that happen at the same time as each other. We have a siege of an Austropalifican city-state in Africa, actually. So somehow the Finnish forces are able to bypass the Semitic states and invade into city-states led by the early hominids. Now, this seems very unlikely that the Semitic states would allow the Finns to go into the early hominid territory. The Semitic states of the Weywus, Kangs, and Shid, these different African tribes of Shabazz people, were more or less allied to the Hwan Empire, as evidenced by the earlier Wikipedia. And especially the Congo states were more or less allied to the Hwan Empire as well. Until afterwards, of course, when the Hwan Empire would not share their technology of nerve staplers to the Melanin Empire, in which case they switch sides and fight for the Finnish Empire instead. This will lead to the Congo states and the Semitic states presumably declaring war on each other, actually. As you can see, both tribes of Shabazz are allied to a different power in this hyperwar. By this time, the various tribes of Shabazz of the Semitic states, Weywus, Kangs, and Shid, they basically settled their affairs and developed a trade union between the 3 clans. So now they're working in cooperation with one another at a much higher capacity than they normally would. Their sci-fi technology is able to counteract any of the Finnish advances and destroy many of their mammoth formations, especially their Canterbury circles, which Finnish war planners have deemed basically impossible to defeat. And the Hwan Empire has been struggling to defeat these Finnish mammoth formations for a long time, but the Semitic states were able to gain an upper hand in this affair. Now, regardless, this early hominid state that the Finnish forces are attacking is basically captured. And afterwards, supposedly, the entire continent of Mu sinks into the bottom of the ocean courtesy of Australopithecine weapons. It inadvertently leads to the loss of Shangri-La for the Hwan Empire, and the Finnish Empire start to now take back huge chunks of Tibet. This, of course, leads to the third Neanderthal. I'm not going to say the word as I don't want to demonetize this video. But the Neanderthals were going through what we call cultural conversion or ethnic removing for a while now. The first ethnic removing was between the Finnish Empire, the second the Hwan Empire. Now the third is with the Finnish Empire and done by a Sparde. So now the Neanderthals are even more reduced in this time period. They're basically close to extinction levels. And during this whole madness, we even have the collapse of Atlantis as well. So somehow, while all this shit is going on, Atlantis is also collapsing, which leads to Finnish and Hwan forces pillaging the previously united Atlantean colonies. So there's a lot of bloodshed going on in these African territories here, these South African territories. A lot of these South African territories were used by the Atlanteans to mine for Finnish space elephants and space mammoths. So you see a type of Atlantean-Finnish cooperation happening eventually at some point. We even see many different African states also working in South Africa as well. Now, the worst happens because a Hwan Emperor, the same one that basically retreated from this battle over here, dies from an STD. Now, if you don't know about Hwan Empire, basically their emperors reincarnate every 100 years. But during this period, it's very crucial that your emperor doesn't die during this conflict. And so now, since the Hwan Emperor is dead to STDs, well, there's no Hwan Emperor. So it's at this period that the Hwan Empire is in a very strategically weak position. They've been able to launch assaults here and there, but because of this duel and because of the Emperor dying from an STD, the Finnish forces are able to capitalize and take back much of India, actually. So you see a complete reversal in the Hwan gains. We have Operation Ragnarok, we have Operation Talorillinen, which was basically two operations by the Finnish forces to take back a lot of this Hwan territory over to their side once again. This whole situation leads to instability across the Hwan Empire, leading to the Hwan Civil War. At about 6,201 BCE, we have the Hwan Civil War, where many different Hwan states start to vie for independence, essentially. These vassals, these different client states, and slave-like races and shit are now rebelling for their own independence, which leads to, of course, the sack of an important Hwan city, that being the sack of Guangzhou. The sacking of the city kills 1 billion Hwan civilians and leads to the collapse of the Hwan Empire. Here we see the devastation of the sack of Guangzhou, and here we see the Hwan Empire essentially reducing in size. As you can see, that is the Hwan Empire currently at the moment. And this was the Hwan Empire basically like at the start of the Hwan Civil War. So you see that basically over time the Hwan Empire is slowly disintegrating into more and more smaller and smaller kingdoms, so to speak. So from this unified front all the way to this disunified like multi-state like empire, so to speak. And so now the Hwan Empire is relegated to a small sliver of territory and of course Pyongyang, where the final battle will take place. So next we have the Battle of Pyongyang right over here. And we have actually a piece of artwork that was depicted in the first 4chan mega threads. Here we see Jackie Chan, Obi-Wan Kenobi, a mammoth, a gene golem, we have the autism pyramid, we have a proto ninja. And here we can even see here the Wikipedia of this battle as well, albeit the date is wrong. 7,845 BCE is not the correct date. It should be in the 6,000s actually. You know, the Finnish forces are going to be successful in capturing parts of Pyongyang, but before they're able to take advantage of their victory, boom, the autism pyramid fires, and autism basically is unleashed across the planet, destroying not only the Hwan forces defending, but the Finnish forces attacking, leading to a Pyrrhic victory on both sides, and ramifications that we will go into right now. So now we get into the Giza Mass Autism Array. The Giza Mass Autism Array was a weapon that we believe to be constructed by Alberto Barbosa, but it has been theorized to have many different creators, including the Finns, the Hwans, Jan ibn Jan, and a bunch of other creators, including, of course, Proto Egypt, which existed in this time period, albeit was pushed aside way later over the course of the Finno Korean Hyperwar. So it was definitely a kingdom that existed but then was destroyed. So you have many different claimants to its construction. Here we theorize this is what the Giza Mass Autism Array existed prior to its move to Pyongyang. As you know, pyramids can move through their thrusters underneath them. And so we theorize after the Battle of Al-Baktukam, the Hwan Empire transported the Giza Mass Autism Array all the way back to Pyongyang. It was first the Giza Vaporization Array, allowing it to destroy the Finnish fleet over Al-Baktukam, but we theorized that once it was brought to Pyongyang, the autism effect was given to it. In Y.S. Cham's book, an essay that talks about the Giza Mass Autism Array and who fired it and all that shit, it really goes into detail over who should be responsible for this firing. And it goes over one of three theories over here. We have the first one, where it's a Hwan firing. We have the second one that is a Finnish firing. We have the third one that is both, and then we have the fourth one. The fourth one stipulates that a beam of autism was fired by the Finns that was then reflected by the Hwan. As you know, the Giza Mass Autism Array was a vaporization array before, but it's also tied with Stonehenge in being a communications array. Same with the Bosnian pyramids being autism pyramids, but also part of the Aurelian communications array. So these pyramids were useful in general for sending out signals, and they theorize in the fourth theory that the pyramids were able to reflect the signal of autism that was being directed at the Hwan Empire, reflecting it back at the Finnish Empire. Now, it's not like the Hwan Empire weren't also specializing in memes. As you can see, there's a meme right over here, a very reaction image meme. Here we have, of course, can you tell the name of the two great kings who brought happiness and peace into people's lives? And the student replies, the Finnic Imperator, Alexandri IX, and Golden Emperor Hui Li Huan, teacher resigned. Ha 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 ha. So you see that memes would be created by the Hwan Empire, and we know that the Hwan Empire would counter the autism usage of the Finnish forces by nerve stapling human proto-emotions. You see, humans used to have many different proto-emotions, about 17 of them, but the Hwan Empire would use nerve staplers to basically destroy these proto-emotions so that the Finnish Empire will not utilize their meme and autism warfare to annihilate the Hwan Empire's forces. So ultimately, we have weapons of mass destruction being used by both sides. And inevitably, because of the damage of the Giza Mass Autism Array, we then, of course, have the biggest loss, that being the reduction in the penis length of all descendants of the Hwan Empire and the socialization of all Finnish citizens being destroyed. So as it stands over here, these two situations are one of the most divisive and destructive components of the Giza Mass Autism Array. Not, of course, also the billions and trillions of humans that were annihilated across the planet because the beam's effects affected basically the entirety of the world. So ultimately, a lot of carnage is happening at the same time. This, of course, leads to the Proto Indo European people who had long been affected by the autism effects, and now because of that are immune to them and are now wreaking havoc across the planet. You see Proto Indo European groups basically rise up across the world, and essentially it leads to the end of the Finno Korean Hyperwar looking somewhat like this. This is the map of the Finno Korean Hyperwar at 6270 BCE. So as you can see, from this huge period of warfare, the technology of the Finno Korean Hyperwar has reached mankind to the level of cavemen before the rise of the Korean and Finnish empires here. And so because of that, the Proto Indo Europeans established many different states across Eurasia. You see multitudes of different Indo-European states here. You have Celtic states. You have some survivors like the Lemurian, Hwan, Finnic remnants here. You have the Basque state. You have the lost city of Iran, which I believe is the Saudi state. You see Long Florida as well. You see the Emu Confederacy, now basically a shadow of its former self right over here. And you see the creation of Jia, Harappa, Sumer, many other states that we come to know and love from this time period, so to speak. Even the Swahili state here. Now, at about 400 years later, this map will continue to update. Here we have a map of Europe 400 years after the Finno Korean Hyperwar, at about 7000 BCE. Though really, since this is 6270 BCE, then it should be 400 years later, so this should be 5,800 BCE, or no, 5,900 BCE. So at about 5,900 BCE, we see many different Finnic successor states. We have the Finnic Khaganate, we have Venetian battle axe cultures, the Proto-Slovene Holy Lustrian Empire, we have another Finnish sovereign Khaganate state, we have a Finnic state over here in Italy, in Spain, we have Imperial Hwan remnants. We have also Wewusian Egypt. You see, after the Proto-Finnic Holy Roman Khaganate was over, after the Finno Korean Hyperwar was over, the Hwan Empire's lands that owned Africa were ceded to King Wewus. Now, because of the trade union and the collaboration of the African states, the Kangs, Shid, and Wewus peoples became one people. They became part of the late Wewus Empire. Now, because of the overall cooperation in the African states, you'll see the tribe of Shabazz, which started off as an independent-like empire, you then see them transition to the early Wewus, where Alberto Barbosa dominated the country and the continent. Then you have them split between Kang, Shid, and Wewus peoples, and then afterwards, from the trade union collaboration, they would then become part of the late Wewus Empire. And basically, all of these people will be part of the Wewus peoples. Now, there'll be some Kangs here and there that'll form their own independent states, but for the most part, this is how Africa really develops later down the line. Especially because they have to differentiate themselves from early Wewus and late Wewus. Early Wewus had a lot of focus on Wewusian magic and being able to explore different astral possibilities and magical Wewusian technology, right? But the late Wewus would have none of these advances, as because of the decline of magic and technology, due to all the carnage in the Finno Korean Hyperwar, the late Wewus were unable to access Wewusian magic. Now, this would be the Finno Korean Hyperwar for a period of time until, of course, the return of the aforementioned aliens that were part of the stellar front of the Finno Korean Hyperwar. They will see the weakness of these early human states and will now begin colonizing the planet in earnest. You can see here, much of the old Earth terrain is now of our current Earth because the sea levels have risen, and now much of these old continents of Atlantis, Lemuria, and Mu are now basically gone. Though apparently the existence of Atlantis and Mu will still be contested even after the Finno Korean Hyperwar. But of the aliens that come visit us, we have, of course, the exotic alien beings of WISE 0855. I mentioned them briefly. They were under the notice of the Hwan and Finnish empires, and unfortunately, they will be sacrificing humans en masse to their dark alien gods. Next, of course, we have the ex-slaves of the Hwan Empire. That would be, of course, the alien race known as Phaeton. Phaeton were energy beings enslaved by the Hwan Empire, used as living computers. They will now be using humans as living computers now. Following these two alien races will be the third one. That would be the Centaurians from Alpha Centauri. They basically were sick and tired of humans running the place, And after killing all of us in Alpha Centauri, they invade our planet with the help of their cousins on Maldek, being, used as a ferry point for Alpha Centauri forces. So they start to wreak havoc. These reptilians are all over the place, ruling our countries from afar and ruling us as slaves, as sex slaves no less. However, that will end following, of course, Maldek's destruction. Maldek is destroyed in what we assume to be a nuclear war with Mars. And so because of that, with Maldek's destruction, the technology once again declines back to caveman levels. And many of the aliens fuck off because Earth is now a shithole. Now, with the aliens gone, we have a couple of human empires that start to form once again. Or at least human-esque empires. We have Mu, which again, during our Finno Korean Hyperwar research, historians don't really know whether or not it was sunk during the Finno Korean Hyperwar or afterwards it had survived. But Mu seemingly survives, thrives, and becomes a technological leader. This big-ass continent that stretches from the entirety of the Pacific Ocean, it pretty much survives most of the Finno Korean Hyperwar and then is sunk by ultra-prolific weapons and comes back in this period. Now, we don't know whether or not aliens ruled Mu at this time or not. Many fictional stories do tell of Muvian human priests worshipping alien gods. We hear of the Nazgul, which are basically a Muvian civilization that are seen to have had 21st century technology and rival the rest of the Earth's civilizations here, with millions of inhabitants, with many different countries splitting apart the Muvian continent. But we don't know what causes their fall this time. Again, many stories tell of a massive kaiju war. They tell of the sinking of the continent from geothermal vents. A lot of stuff. But replacing Mu comes Atlantis. Atlantis somehow survives. If you can see it right over here, we have late Atlantis on this map that survives in some areas of the world, and as well as these small-ass islands over here. So Atlantis survives, it thrives again and becomes a technological leader. We don't know why that is, and we assume that it sinks into the bottom of the ocean soon after the Greek gods get wind of Atlantis trying to invade Athens over here. As you can see, the Greek city-states are starting to form in 6270 BCE. So, yeah, I guess they pissed off the wrong people. But then we have pre-diluvian Babylon. Now, Babylon, as you can see right over here, is ruled over by Sumer, who are ruled over by the Annunaki. The Annunaki are from the planet Nibiru over here. Nibiru is a pretty well-known planet, and it's assuming from different sources that Nibiru is almost destroyed, and because of that, it results in the Anunnaki fleeing their planet and coming to Earth, where they rule over the planet, they civilize the human inhabitants, and they are treated as gods. However, they are actually miners who are trying to mine into the planet for its resources. Now, we assume that they become technological leaders and everything is swimmingly and everything is fine until they find artifacts of the Finno Korean Hyperwar. Rice and kimchi. There, because they don't want the humans to revolt against them, they basically cause the deluge, the worldwide attested historically accurate flood that annihilates all human civilization and brings us even lower than the levels of the destruction of Maldek and the Finno Korean Hyperwar, which leads us to where we are today as cavemen, talking about the Finno Korean Hyperwar on 4chan over here. Here's all my cavemen descendants. Here are all the 4chan users over here that will talk about this Finno Korean Hyperwar in the future. And that's basically the story of the Finno Korean Hyperwar. Right now is the perfect time to buy your own FlexiSpot desk. By visiting the website today, you can participate in the Black Friday sale. And using my code YTE730 for $30 off, you can get yourself any type of product that you want, and special discounts for medical students, graduates, teachers, and military members. Some of these products have up to 80% off discounts, and there's a chance to get 100% free orders as well. Thank you to my patrons for making this video possible, including Desibu189, Frank U. Dejan, Alexander Turpin, Alexander Smoker, Khan of Han, MM Marco, Modestly Liquid GI, Varun Pandi, Hispanic Memes, Yeti, Thomas O'Leary, Christian Zook, Zamatir, Reformator, Chris B, Samuel Ojeda Lopez, Stefan Summoner, Hero P, Cody the Bro, Albert Lee, Comrade, Orlando Rivera, TH, Electric Messiah, Magnus, and X Sona HX. If you want your name on the board, go to my Patreon. You can also go to my Patreon for all the sources listed in the video down below. And let me know what kind of video you want to see next now that the Finno Korean Hyperwar is done. I'm thinking Agartha or Hyperborea, but we can go anywhere. Bye. God, I gotta take a shit.